The humid air hung heavy over the Solomon Islands that August morning in 1942. Steam rose from the jungle as the sun climbed higher. 11,000 Marines prepared for what would change everything in the Pacific War. August 7th marked the beginning of Operation Watchtower, the first major Allied strike against Japan's expanding empire. But as combat boots hit the beaches of Guadalcanal, nobody predicted the weapon that would emerge from the campaign's darkest nights. This weapon required no ammunition, needed no steel or explosives. It lived in the very structure of human speech itself. Picture the challenge facing these Marines. Dense tropical growth blocked vision beyond a few yards. Enemy soldiers wore captured American uniforms. Some spoke perfect English. Darkness provided perfect cover for infiltration. Japanese forces moved like ghosts through the jungle. They studied American positions during daylight, then came silently through the night, sometimes alone, sometimes in small groups. Always dangerous. How could sentries tell friend from foe when eyes couldn't see clearly? When uniforms might be stolen? When voices might deceive? The answer lay hidden in pronunciation patterns learned during childhood. Master Technical Sergeant James Hurlbut witnessed this innovation firsthand. He landed with assault forces on that sweltering August morning. A combat correspondent with the Marine Corps Reserve. His testimony provides our clearest window into what actually happened. Years later, in March 1943, Hurlbut sat for an official interview. His words were preserved in naval records. What he described was both simple and brilliant. Marines always used passwords containing the letter L, he explained. The reason was practical and devastating. Japanese speakers struggled with this sound. Their language contained no equivalent. The letter L became their betrayer. But Hurlbut noted a crucial limitation. Sometimes the test failed with English-educated Japanese soldiers. This wasn't a perfect system. Smart enemies could sometimes overcome it. Yet for most infiltrators, the L sound remained an insurmountable barrier. The linguistic reality behind this tactic runs deeper than simple pronunciation difficulty. Understanding why requires examining how human brains process language sounds during childhood development. Japanese possesses one liquid sound. Linguists call it an apical alveolar tap. Native speakers produce it by quickly touching tongue to teeth ridge. English speakers would recognize it as something between R and L sounds. English contains two completely separate liquid sounds. The L requires tongue placement against teeth ridge with air flowing around tongue sides. American R pulls the tongue back without touching the mouth roof at all. These differences aren't just pronunciation variations. They represent entirely different perceptual categories established during early language learning. Japanese brains process both English sounds through their single liquid category. Even Japanese speakers with excellent English vocabulary struggled with this distinction. Their childhood language patterns remained unchanged despite adult learning. Under stress or time pressure, native pronunciation emerged automatically. Research conducted during and after the war confirmed this phenomenon. Studies showed Japanese speakers living in America for over 12 years still struggled with R and L identification. The difficulty wasn't hearing problems or physical limitations. It was perceptual categorization, established in infancy. This knowledge provided Marines with an almost foolproof identification method. Challenge words containing multiple L sounds would expose infiltrators within seconds. Native English speakers pronounced them automatically and correctly. Japanese speakers typically substituted their familiar liquid sound. The captured Japanese airfield became Henderson Field by August 8th, named for Major Lofton Henderson, killed at Midway. The first aircraft landed August 12th. By August 20th, 31 planes operated from the Strip. Control of this airfield drove the entire six-month campaign. Japanese forces launched repeated attempts to retake it. Security around Henderson Field became absolutely critical. Every night brought new infiltration attempts. Japanese soldiers demonstrated remarkable skill in these operations. They moved through jungle vegetation with extraordinary stealth. Camouflage made them nearly invisible. Some spoke English fluently enough to fool casual listeners. Traditional identification methods proved inadequate in jungle conditions. Documents could be captured or forged, uniforms taken from casualties. Physical appearance was impossible to verify in darkness. Even voices could deceive when infiltrators had language training. Marines needed something that couldn't be easily faked, something that revealed identity through characteristics beyond conscious control. Childhood pronunciation patterns provided exactly this kind of automatic identification. The effectiveness relied on fundamental aspects of human language acquisition. Phonological patterns established during early childhood remain remarkably stable throughout life. They resist modification even with extensive adult training and conscious effort. When sentries challenged approaching figures with L-containing passwords, the results were immediate and reliable. American speakers responded with automatic correct pronunciation. Japanese infiltrators revealed themselves through substitute sounds that trained ears detected instantly. One specific word entered the historical record through journalist Oliver Gramling. Writing for the Associated Press in 1942, Gramling documented the use of Lollapalooza as a shibboleth. If the first syllables came back as Rora, sentries opened fire immediately. This word represented ideal tactical choice, an American slang term meaning something extraordinary. It contained 4 L sounds in rapid succession at syllable beginnings. For Japanese speakers, each L presented pronunciation difficulty. Correct production required extensive training most infiltrators lacked. The instruction to focus on first syllables made tactical sense. Sentries didn't need complete passwords to identify mispronunciation. This reduced exposure time during challenges. Quick identification meant faster response to genuine threats. However, we must acknowledge limitations in our evidence. Gramling's account provides the only known source for Lollapalooza specifically. While the book was contemporary and Gramling was credible, independent corroboration would strengthen this claim. Other combat memoirs rarely mention specific challenge words. Richard Tregaskis documented Guadalcanal extensively, but didn't reference particular passwords. Robert Leckie's detailed account similarly lacks these specifics. This absence might indicate the practice was more routine than dramatic. Security procedures that work effectively often become unremarkable to those using them daily. Successful techniques blend into standard operations without generating memorable stories. What remains certain is systematic use of L-based passwords. Hurlbut's direct testimony confirms this practice. Whether specific words like Lollapalooza were used remains plausible but unproven. The documented principle matters more than individual examples. The six-month campaign stretched from August 1942 through February 1943. Japanese forces conducted their final evacuation February 9th, saving approximately 10,000 troops. But the strategic defeat was complete. Japan never regained Pacific initiative. Throughout this period, major battles punctuated continuous infiltration attempts. The Battle of Tanaru River on August 21st, Edson's Ridge, September 12-14. The climactic battle for Henderson Field, October 23-26. Between these engagements, security remained paramount. Japanese tactical doctrine emphasized night operations and infiltration. Small groups moved through jungle darkness, seeking intelligence, sabotage opportunities, or misdirection chances. They employed excellent camouflage and remarkable stealth. Some attempted impersonation of American personnel. These infiltration attempts created persistent security challenges. Sentries posted around defensive perimeters made split-second life-or-death decisions. Visual confirmation was often impossible. Document verification took too long. Voice recognition could be fooled. Pronunciation testing provided quick, reliable identification that exploited something infiltrators couldn't easily control: the automatic speech patterns learned during childhood language acquisition. These patterns emerged under pressure regardless of conscious preparation or training level. Hurlbut noted another interesting security indicator beyond pronunciation testing. One infiltrator was detected through overly precise grammar usage. The individual said, "Hold your fire, we are American Marines, and wish to report our evening's activities." The sentry fired immediately because real Marines wouldn't talk that way. This observation highlights how infiltrators with extensive English training sometimes revealed themselves through unnatural formality. Native speakers used casual, colloquial expressions that foreign learners rarely mastered completely. The term shibboleth itself derives from Biblical Hebrew. Judges chapter 12 describes how Gileadites identified enemy Ephraimites through their inability to pronounce this word correctly. Ephraimites said Sibboleth without the initial sh sound, revealing their tribal identity. Similar linguistic tests appeared throughout military history when forces needed reliable friend or foe identification. Language differences provided markers that were difficult to fake and easy to verify quickly. The D-Day invasion employed different linguistic principles for similar purposes. Challenge password systems used flash, thunder, welcome, specifically because German speakers found these sounds difficult. The voiceless dental fricative in thunder doesn't exist in German. The voiced labial approximant in welcome is similarly absent from German phonology. This parallel European theater usage demonstrates widespread military recognition of linguistic identification value. Forces throughout World War II exploited phonological differences for security purposes wherever language barriers existed between opposing armies. Other English sounds that challenged Japanese speakers included the V sound, typically pronounced as B, the TH sounds, both voiced and voiceless, the complex English vowel system with many more distinctions than Japanese's 5 vowels. Security-conscious password selection could exploit any of these differences. The LR distinction appears most commonly used based on available testimony. This choice made practical sense, given how reliably it distinguished native English from Japanese pronunciation patterns. The difference was consistent, automatic, and difficult to overcome with training. Broader Pacific theater context illuminates additional security challenges. American forces faced persistent infiltration, deception, and identification difficulties throughout island campaigns. Challenge password systems became even more critical due to unique Pacific conditions. First, jungle environments reduced visibility dramatically. Dense vegetation, heavy rainfall, and frequent night operations meant sentries often relied solely on audio identification. Second, Japanese doctrine emphasized infiltration and confusion tactics designed to create maximum chaos during attacks. Traditional challenge password systems required regular updates to prevent compromise. Passwords needed distribution to friendly forces while remaining secret from enemies. Ideally, they should be chosen to make enemy pronunciation difficult. The Military Intelligence Service Language School provides fascinating counterpoint to pronunciation testing. Established November 1941 at San Francisco's Presidio, it moved to Camp Savage, Minnesota in June 1942. Later relocated to Fort Snelling in August 1944. This institution trained over 6,000 Japanese-American soldiers as translators, interpreters, and intelligence specialists. These Nisei provided critical language support throughout Pacific operations. They interrogated prisoners, translated documents, intercepted communications, and offered cultural insights. Their contribution was essential to Allied Pacific success. Many served while their families remained in internment camps. Their loyalty and professionalism under extraordinary circumstances deserves recognition, alongside their linguistic expertise. For pronunciation testing purposes, these Japanese-American soldiers would pass any L-based challenge automatically. They spoke English with native pronunciation, having acquired the language during American childhoods. Their presence meant security forces needed awareness that Japanese ethnicity didn't indicate enemy status. Private First Class Eugene Sledge provides verified Pacific combat accounts, though he didn't serve at Guadalcanal during active fighting. His memoir, With the Old Breed, documents Peleliu and Okinawa battles with K Company, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, 1st Marine Division. Sledge arrived at Guadalcanal in 1944 for training after fighting concluded. His book focuses on combat's brutal realities, psychological toll, and infantry experiences rather than security procedures. The absence of pronunciation testing discussion in most combat memoirs suggests the practice may have been more routine than elaborate. Effective security procedures often become unremarkable to daily users. If pronunciation testing was as systematic as popular accounts suggest, more frequent mentions would appear in veteran writings. Relative silence indicates the practice, while confirmed, may have been more limited than later stories implied. American casualties totaled approximately 1,700 killed and 8,000 wounded. Japanese losses reached roughly 31,000 killed, many from disease and starvation, as American naval forces interdicted supply lines. The successful Japanese evacuation saved 10,000 troops, but couldn't disguise strategic defeat. Pronunciation testing limitations deserve acknowledgement alongside its effectiveness. English-educated Japanese could sometimes pass L-based tests. Japanese intelligence occasionally employed individuals with English backgrounds for operations. Combat noise might mask subtle pronunciation differences. False positives presented additional risks. American forces included diverse backgrounds, including Filipino scouts, Chinese Americans, and others whose English carried non-standard pronunciations. Security procedures needed accommodation for legitimate variation among Allied forces. Filipino languages typically contain L and R phonemes, so Filipino English speakers had no fundamental difficulty with these sounds. However, their pronunciation might sound different from American patterns in other ways. Successful implementation required distinguishing between foreign accents and enemy infiltration. Despite limitations, pronunciation testing represented an elegant solution to genuine security problems. It exploited real phonological differences, required no special equipment, could be administered quickly, and provided reasonable identification basis when other methods failed. The test worked by accessing fundamental language acquisition characteristics. Phonological patterns established during early childhood remain stable throughout life. They're difficult to modify even with extensive training and conscious effort. This stability made pronunciation testing reliable for military identification. The story serves multiple purposes for modern audiences. Historians gain insight into practical Pacific War security operations. Linguists see real-world phonological knowledge applications. General audiences encounter fascinating examples of language becoming warfare tools. Most importantly, it reminds us to distinguish between documented facts and later embellishments. The verified core remains clear and compelling without dramatic additions. American Guadalcanal forces used L-containing passwords to identify Japanese infiltrators who struggled with correct pronunciation. This practice was documented by participants, made excellent sense given Japanese-English phonological differences, and represented practical innovation facing genuine security challenges. The specific word Lollapalooza appears in one contemporary source and fits the pattern perfectly, though independent confirmation would strengthen the claim. Beyond this verified foundation, popular accounts have added unconfirmed details, invented statistics appearing nowhere in historical records, and attributed the practice to systematic Pacific-wide programs without supporting documentation. These embellishments distort historical records and create false impressions about pronunciation testing's nature and extent. Honest history, based solely on verified evidence, is remarkable enough without embellishment. It shows American forces adapting to jungle warfare challenges, exploiting linguistic differences to improve security, and innovating tactically to address immediate threats. The demonstration of observation value, practical intelligence, and willingness to try new approaches provides windows into Pacific Theater combat operation realities. Security, identification, and constant infiltration threats created persistent challenges for American forces. Marines who developed and implemented pronunciation testing deserve recognition for practical innovation. The broader campaign context reminds us of warfare's human cost and military operations' complexity. Japanese-American linguists serving while families remained interned demonstrated loyalty and professionalism under extraordinarily difficult circumstances. Their essential contribution to victory adds depth and nuance to Pacific War understanding. The verified historical record shows American Marines at Guadalcanal systematically used L-containing passwords to help identify Japanese infiltrators. This practice, directly testified by combat correspondent James Hurlbut, exploited real phonological differences between languages. While broader claims about systematic Pacific-wide testing cannot be verified, documented Guadalcanal use demonstrates practical tactical innovation addressing genuine security challenges. Lessons learned there, including pronunciation testing and other security procedures, informed American operations throughout remaining Pacific War campaigns. Each subsequent operation from Tarawa through the Marianas, Philippines, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa built on Guadalcanal experience foundations. While we cannot document pronunciation testing at later battles with identical certainty, the principle of exploiting language differences for security purposes remained sound. Scientific understanding of phonology and language acquisition that explained pronunciation testing effectiveness came through research conducted during and after war. But Guadalcanal Marines didn't need linguistic theory to recognize Japanese speakers' difficulty with English L sounds and that this difficulty could identify infiltrators. This represents the best practical knowledge type. Observations derived from experience and applied to solve immediate problems. Broader implications extend beyond military history. Recognition that language features can serve as reliable identifiers has influenced security procedures in subsequent conflicts. Vietnam War American forces used similar principles, though adapted to different linguistic contrasts. Recent conflicts have incorporated increasingly sophisticated linguistic analysis, including voice stress analysis and dialect identification technologies extending well beyond simple pronunciation testing. Ethical dimensions of pronunciation testing merit consideration. Unlike security measures relying on deception or causing physical harm, pronunciation testing was essentially diagnostic. It identified linguistic background without causing harm beyond security consequences of failed identification. Soldiers passing the test suffered no ill effects. Those failing were identified as potential infiltrators through objective phonetic evidence they lacked, claimed linguistic backgrounds, not through arbitrary discrimination. This relatively benign nature, compared to more violent or coercive security measures, kept it acceptable within war laws and Geneva Conventions. The test highlights important principles about identity and ethnicity. Japanese Americans serving in Pacific theaters, such as military intelligence service members, passed pronunciation tests automatically because their linguistic identity was American, regardless of ethnic heritage. This demonstrated pronunciation testing was fundamentally a language background measure rather than ethnicity or race. The correlation between Japanese citizenship and Japanese language background, not ethnicity itself, made testing effective for identifying enemy infiltrators. This distinction, while perhaps not fully articulated during wartime, had important implications for understanding relationships between language, identity, and security. The human dimension of Guadalcanal campaign extends beyond tactics and security measures to courage, determination, and adaptability displayed by combatants on both sides. Americans who developed and implemented pronunciation testing deserve recognition for practical innovation. Japanese soldiers facing these measures were themselves skilled, determined fighters operating under extremely difficult conditions, fighting thousands of miles from home with increasingly tenuous supply lines. Post-war research into phonetic phenomena, making pronunciation testing effective, enriched our understanding of human language, acquisition, and processing. Linguists and cognitive scientists, many having served in military intelligence during war, conducted extensive second-language pronunciation acquisition studies. Research by Patricia Kuhl and others demonstrated infants are born able to distinguish phonetic contrasts from any human language. But this universal ability narrows during the first year as brains specialize for native language phonetic categories. This neural commitment to native phonetic categories, while essential for efficient language processing, creates exactly the limitations that made pronunciation testing effective during warfare. Adult Japanese speakers trying to master English L and R sounds weren't simply learning new articulations. They were attempting to rewire neural perceptual categories established decades earlier, a task cognitive science has shown to be extremely difficult and often impossible to complete fully. World War II pronunciation testing also influenced linguistic research into foreign accent concepts. Before the war, accented speech was often viewed as incorrect pronunciation fixable through practice and instruction. Post-war research revealed foreign accent reflects deep structural differences in phonetic processing, not simple errors. This understanding led to more sophisticated language teaching approaches and recognition that adult language learners, despite best efforts, almost always retain some native language accent features. For military security, this meant pronunciation testing would remain viable identification methods in future conflicts, where language differences between forces could be exploited. The principle has been applied in various forms in subsequent conflicts, though modern technology has added tools like voice stress analysis and linguistic profiling extending well beyond simple pronunciation testing. Thousands of Japanese Americans who served illustrate complex dynamics of pronunciation testing in wars where American forces included Japanese Americans serving loyally despite family internment. These Nisei soldiers who grew up speaking English demonstrated through native pronunciation that linguistic identity could cross ethnic lines. Conversely, Japanese soldiers attempting infiltration revealed through non-native pronunciation that linguistic identity was determined by developmental language exposure, not ethnicity. Summer 1945 brought preparations for what many expected would be the final, bloodiest Pacific War phase. Potential invasion of Japanese home islands would have placed American soldiers in environments where enemy infiltration would be even more challenging to detect than on Pacific islands. Japanese forces would have access to unlimited local resources, civilian clothing, and potential civilian population support. Reliable identification procedures would have been absolutely critical in this environment. Plans developed for comprehensive security protocols, combining pronunciation testing with extensive documentation requirements, physical identification measures, and restricted movement zones. Protocols anticipated that even with pronunciation testing, some Japanese individuals with childhood English exposure or exceptional linguistic abilities might attempt infiltration. Multi-layered security would provide redundant verification to catch even sophisticated infiltration attempts. These plans were never fully implemented due to Japan's surrender following atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but they represented culmination of years of linguistic security measure evolution. Post-war period saw declassification of many Pacific security procedure documents. Publication of these materials in subsequent decades provided fascinating insights into various Pacific War operation aspects. Historians found extensive documentation of security measure development, implementation, and effectiveness. Yet specific pronunciation testing documentation remained limited primarily to Hurlbut testimony and Grammarly reference. The story reminds us military success depends on countless small innovations developed by those facing immediate problems and finding practical solutions. Recognition that language differences could be exploited for identification purposes demonstrated practical intelligence and tactical flexibility. Systematic use of L-based passwords at Guadalcanal, while perhaps not as elaborate as popular accounts suggest, represented genuine innovation addressing real security challenges. Today, Guadalcanal pronunciation testing stands as a small but significant Pacific War chapter. It illustrates how language, that most human of characteristics, can become warfare factors. It shows how understanding differences between languages can provide tactical advantages. It demonstrates warfare success often comes from combining large strategic decisions with countless small tactical improvements developed by soldiers facing immediate problems. Historical records, when examined carefully and honestly, reveal both pronunciation testing achievements and limitations as security measures. It worked at Guadalcanal, providing sentries with quick, reliable methods for identifying potential infiltrators. It made perfect sense, given Japanese and English phonological system linguistic realities. But it wasn't perfect, wasn't comprehensive Pacific-wide programs, and wasn't elaborate operations some popular accounts suggest. By understanding what evidence actually shows and being clear about evidence limits, we honor Pacific fighters' memory while maintaining intellectual honesty proper history requires. Guadalcanal Marines faced extraordinary challenges in one of the first major American Pacific War offensive operations. Their innovation in developing practical security measures like pronunciation testing, alongside combat courage and determination in holding Henderson Field against repeated Japanese attacks, contributed to strategic victory changing Pacific War course. The verified story core remains powerful. American forces exploited fundamental differences in how Japanese and English speakers produce and perceive liquid consonant sounds to create security measures that were simple, effective, and difficult to counterfeit. This linguistic knowledge application, whether derived from conscious understanding or practical observation, represented exactly the tactical innovation type that contributed to Allied Pacific victory. The pronunciation testing story continues to resonate because it demonstrates how human language characteristics can become practical tools in extraordinary circumstances. It shows how careful observation, practical intelligence, and willingness to adapt can create solutions to seemingly impossible problems. Most importantly, it illustrates how individual innovations by soldiers facing immediate challenges can contribute to larger strategic successes. The Marines at Guadalcanal, who recognized that Japanese speakers struggled with English L sounds, and who developed this recognition into systematic security procedures, demonstrated exactly the kind of practical problem-solving that characterized American forces throughout the Pacific War. Their innovation, documented in the historical record through participant testimony, represents a small but significant example of how language itself can become a weapon of war when linguistic knowledge is applied to tactical challenges.